What if everything feeling stuck right now is actually your body preparing to shift? Here's what nobody tells you: you're not the dense, limited form you see in the mirror. You're energy, pure, fluid, reorganizing energy that's been taught to believe it's solid matter. And that false belief is the only thing keeping you trapped. This video breaks down what happens the moment you stop identifying as a fixed physical form and start recognizing what you actually are. No woo-woo, just the physics of how reality reorganizes when the observer changes. You'll understand why your body already knows this truth, why certain people seem to flow through life differently, and how one simple recognition dissolves resistance faster than any technique you've tried. This is the shift that changes everything. If your eyes are on these words, at this very moment, there's a part of your being that already senses what I'm going to share with you. I'm not talking about your analytical mind, the one that's probably questioning right now, weighing everything, getting ready to write this off as just another new age idea. I'm pointing to something deeper than thought, something beyond what you believe, something that goes past the physical body you've been trained to think of as who you really are. That deeper part has been patiently waiting for this moment of recognition. The fact that your attention found its way here right now, out of countless other moments you could be experiencing, tells me you're prepared to recall something you've always carried within you, but society has taught you to ignore. You aren't the physical form scanning these words right now. You're the life force that brings it to life. Let that sink in for a second. Don't race to make sense of it with your intellect. Just feel into it. Pay attention to what stirs in your system when you open yourself to the idea that everything you've been told about who you fundamentally are might actually be completely reversed. The trap of thinking we're solid. Since the day you came into this world, you've been conditioned to see yourself as physical matter. Your name got attached to a body. Your personal story got built from memories stored away in neural pathways. Your sense of self got constructed from the roles you take on, the connections you maintain, the things you own. Take a look around you right this moment. Everything in your view seems firm, distinct, lasting. The walls around you, the furniture, the screen or device in front of you. Your own hands, your own physical form, all of it showing up as thick, separate, unchanging substance. But here's something they never covered in your school education, something most people go their whole lives without ever realizing. Matter isn't what it looks like on the surface. Scientists studying quantum mechanics figured this out more than 100 years ago, and honestly, they've been quietly wrestling with what it all means ever since. When you zoom in on matter at its most basic level, when you keep looking closer and closer at what things are really constructed from, something pretty mind-blowing shows up. There's essentially nothing solid there. Not emptiness the way you might picture it, but pure life force vibrating at particular frequencies, producing the appearance of something solid through rhythm and repetition. That table that looks so firm and real? It's actually more than 99.9% empty space, with tiny particles racing around so fast they trick you into seeing density. Your body that feels so concrete, so lasting, so obviously you? Same deal. It's a temporary configuration of life force, constantly trading atoms with everything surrounding it, completely rebuilding itself every handful of years, yet somehow keeping up the illusion of being one fixed, separate thing. But nobody teaches us to feel ourselves this way. We're taught to be the body, to guard it, to accept its boundaries, to believe when it stops working, we simply stop existing. This mistake of thinking we are matter sits at the root of every single restriction you face in life. Not because matter is somehow wrong or bad, but because it's not actually what you are. When you confuse yourself with something you're not, you automatically take on all the restrictions of that mistaken identity. What shows up when you look deeper? I want you to experiment with something right here and now. Look down at your hand. Really study it. Your first impression tells you this is solid flesh, bone, skin. This is matter. This is what's real. Now think about what's genuinely taking place. Your hand consists of cells, roughly 50 billion of them, all functioning in flawless harmony without you consciously directing them. Those cells get made from molecules. Those molecules get formed from atoms. Those atoms get composed of particles smaller than atoms that, when scientists observe them, act more like waves of possibility than actual objects you could touch. The chair underneath you, the air filling your lungs, the light reaching your eyes, all of it is energy pulsing at different speeds. The only reason your hand can't move straight through the chair comes down to their electromagnetic fields pushing against each other, giving you the feeling of contact, of something solid, of being separate. But being separate is the trick our senses play on us. At the quantum level, everything gets tangled up together, connected, part of one unified field showing up in endless forms. You've likely heard this stuff before. Energy, frequency, vibration. All those spiritual words that get tossed around so much they've started to lose their punch. But I'm not presenting this as philosophy or something to believe in. I'm guiding you toward direct awareness of what you genuinely are underneath the story your mind keeps telling about itself. Because something remarkable takes place the instant you change your core sense of identity from matter to energy. Reality, which has been treating you like you're a fixed, restricted, separate thing, suddenly has to rearrange itself around an entirely different starting point. In the comments, drop one word that captures the energy you're choosing to step into right now. Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's flow, maybe it's lightness, maybe it's something completely your own. Let that word be a small but powerful statement, a message you're sending not just in this space, but out into the quantum field itself. The moment of recognition that transforms everything. 3 years back, I found myself sitting in a doctor's office getting test results that made absolutely no sense from a medical standpoint. 6 months before that, I'd gotten diagnosed with a condition that usually requires years of treatment to get better, if it even improves at all. The doctors had been straightforward with me. This was going to be a gradual process, needing medication, changes to my lifestyle, and expectations grounded in reality. But my latest tests revealed something that seemed impossible. Total reversal. Not just improvement. Complete reversal. As if the condition had never been there in the first place. The doctor kept repeating, "I can't make sense of this. This just doesn't happen." And I understood precisely why it happened, though I couldn't put it in terms he'd be willing to accept. Because 3 months before getting those tests done, something fundamental had transformed in how I felt myself existing. I'd been meditating, though not in the conventional way. Not attempting to silence my thoughts or reach some calm state. I'd been playing around with perception itself, with the direct awareness of what I actually was beneath all the layers of identity, narrative, and conditioning. Then one morning, it just occurred. Not through pushing or using some method, but through a sudden breaking down of the whole structure I'd been calling myself. I was sitting in stillness, and my awareness naturally sank past thinking, past physical sensation, past emotion, into something underneath all of that. And in that deeper place, there was no body. There was no individual self. There was only energy moving, pulsing, vibrating, completely flowing together with everything around it. It wasn't like my body vanished. It was more that the edge I'd always experienced between my body and everything else melted away. I could sense my physical form, but I could sense it the same way I sensed the air touching me, the sounds filling the room, the light streaming through the window. All of it was one continuous field of energy, and I was that field temporarily showing up as this specific form. The awareness probably lasted about 3 minutes before my thinking mind came back and rebuilt the familiar feeling of being a separate person. But those 3 minutes shifted everything, because I directly felt what I actually was. Not believed it, not pictured it in my mind, not repeated affirmations about it. I experienced it. And from that moment forward, my body started changing in ways that couldn't be explained medically, because the awareness operating it was no longer thinking of itself as dense, limited, and stuck in fixed physical form. The actual physics of shifting identity. Let me break down what genuinely takes place when you move from thinking of yourself as matter to recognizing yourself as energy. And I'm talking about the literal, measurable physics here, not some spiritual metaphor. Your body constantly receives instructions from your awareness about how to organize itself. Every single cell has receptors that pick up on the electromagnetic signals your brain creates based on your thoughts, your emotions, and most critically, your fundamental sense of who you are. When you identify as matter, as a fixed physical body, with limitations you inherited from genetics, past experiences, and biological programming, your cells pick up that information and arrange themselves accordingly. They activate certain genes and turn off others. They age at certain speeds. They react to dangers and opportunities in predictable ways. This doesn't happen consciously. You're not deliberately telling your cells what to do, but your deepest sense of what you are broadcasts constantly, and your body pays attention. Scientists studying epigenetics have found that gene expression can shift dramatically based on how you perceive things, what you believe, and your emotional state. The exact same genetic code can create completely different results depending on the signals the cell gets from consciousness. But here's what they're only starting to grasp. The most powerful signal isn't what you think or believe about yourself, it's what you fundamentally identify as. When you identify as thick matter, you send out a frequency that makes density stronger. Your cells organize around staying permanent, protecting themselves, and keeping existing patterns in place. Change becomes slow, hard, requiring massive effort. But when you recognize yourself as energy, something shifts at the most basic level. Your cells get different instructions, not through willpower or intention, but through the natural reorganization that happens when awareness recognizes its real nature. All of a sudden, patterns that seemed locked in place become flexible. Restrictions that looked permanent show themselves as temporary expressions of energy that can reorganize into different arrangements. This isn't some kind of magic. This is physics that medical science is only beginning to wrap its head around, because it requires accepting that consciousness comes first, not that it emerges from matter, and that identity shapes biology more powerfully than biology shapes identity. So before we dive deeper into how this actually shows up in your everyday life, let me invite you into something real. If you've been feeling like something here is clicking for you, if part of you is waking up to your own power, hit that like button if you just had an aha moment, because like attracts like. And subscribe to stay with this space and grow with us. This isn't just a channel, it's a frequency. If you felt something shift while watching, you're already tuned in. What actually changes in your day-to-day life? You're probably curious what this looks like in real-world terms, because recognizing yourself as energy sounds abstract, theoretical, disconnected from the ordinary reality of handling bills and working through relationships and managing whatever challenges are currently filling your life. But the shift is anything except abstract. It transforms everything about how you move through reality, though not in the ways you'd probably guess. The first thing you pick up on is that resistance melts away. Not because you've developed some spiritual practice of letting go of resistance, but because resistance itself comes from believing you're a separate, solid thing that life happens to. When you identify as matter, you go through life as a series of impacts. Things happen to you. Situations press against you. People have effects on you. The world is packed with threats and obstacles that your solid, vulnerable form has to navigate carefully. But when you recognize yourself as energy, the core dynamic shifts. You're not a separate thing that life happens to. You're flowing together with the same field that's creating all the situations and people and experiences you run into. It's not that challenges vanish. It's that your relationship with them transforms. Instead of solid resistance bumping into solid obstacle, there's flexibility, movement, natural reorganization around whatever's showing up. People call this being in flow, But that phrase doesn't quite capture the actual physics of what's taking place. You're literally experiencing reality from a different fundamental position, not as separate from the field, but as the field temporarily focusing itself through your particular perspective. The second thing that shifts is your relationship with time. When you identify as matter, you take on time's apparent straight-line movement. Your past shapes you through memory and conditioning. Your future creates worry through anticipation and planning. The present moment is where you're stuck, trying to move from a past you want to leave behind toward a future you hope to arrive at. But energy doesn't experience time the way solid matter seems to. Energy exists in what physicists describe as connections that don't depend on location. Everything interconnected across space and time at once. When you recognize yourself as energy, you don't lose your ability to work with linear time, but you're no longer completely ruled by it. Past patterns that seemed permanently carved into your identity show themselves as current energy configurations that can shift. Future possibilities that seemed far away or impossible become present potentials you can. Why synchronicities start multiplying? Not because you've figured out how to manipulate reality, but because you've stopped experiencing yourself as a fixed point in linear time and started experiencing yourself as energy that exists across multiple dimensions of time simultaneously. The practical process of recognition. I know what your thinking mind is up to right now. It's either writing all of this off as too abstract, too spiritual, too removed from your actual life, or it's trying to figure out how to use this information, how to apply it, what technique will shift your identity from matter to energy. But both of those reactions completely miss the point. Because recognition isn't something you make happen. It's something you allow, something you notice, something that's already true that you've been trained to look past. You don't need to become energy. You already are energy. You just need to stop only identifying with the dense physical form that energy is temporarily showing up as. Let me walk you through direct recognition right now, not through believing or imagining, but through attention itself. Close your eyes if you're somewhere safe to do that. If not, just soften your gaze and bring your attention inward. Notice that you're aware. Don't think about awareness. Just notice that you're aware of reading these words, aware of your body, aware of sounds in your environment, aware of thoughts coming up. Now, notice that this awareness isn't sitting in any specific location. You might automatically feel like awareness is in your head behind your eyes. But if you search for it directly, you actually can't find awareness anywhere particular. It's not an object. It's not located in space. This awareness doesn't get produced by your brain. Your brain is something you're aware of through sensation and thought. But the awareness itself? That's not inside the matter of your body. The body is inside awareness, showing up as sensation, as image, as concept. Stay with this recognition. You are not the body you're aware of. You are the awareness the body appears within. Now notice the energy of being alive, not the concept of energy, the actual felt sense of aliveness moving through your system. There's a vibration, a movement, a current that's bringing this form to life. You can feel it if you get still enough. That aliveness, that energy, that vibration, that's what you genuinely are. Not the temporary form it's moving through, not the story your mind creates about that form, but the living energy itself. And notice that this energy doesn't stop at your skin. The sensation you label as, my body, is energy. The sensation you label as, air on my skin, is energy. The sensation you label as, sounds around me, is energy. All of it is the same field vibrating at different speeds, creating the appearance of separation, of inside and outside, of me and not me. But at the level of direct experience, before thought comes in and labels and divides everything, there's just energy moving, vibrating, expressing itself in endless forms. And you are that. Not you have that. You are that. Open your eyes. Notice that nothing has shifted in your external circumstances, but something has moved in your direct experience of what you are. That shift, however subtle it might be, is the beginning of everything else transforming. What your body already knows that your mind keeps denying. Your mind might be skeptical of everything I'm sharing with you. That's perfectly fine. The mind gets designed to keep familiar patterns going, to protect the known version of yourself, to push back against dissolving into something that feels threatening to its structure. But your body already knows this truth. Your body has always known it. Every time you've felt chills during a powerful moment, that's your body recognizing energetic resonance. Every time you sensed someone's presence before actually seeing them, that's your body reading energy before your mind processes matter. Every time you've had a gut instinct that turned out to be accurate, that's your body accessing information through energetic connection rather than filtering everything through mental analysis. Your body is an energy reading instrument far more advanced than anything science has built. It can pick up electromagnetic fields, subtle vibrations, quantum entanglement effects that your thinking mind dismisses as imagination or coincidence. But you've been trained to trust your thinking mind over your feeling body, to prioritize analysis over intuition, to believe the story about reality rather than the direct. Kids know this instinctively before they get taught otherwise. They experience their bodies as energy, flexible, changing, magical, unlimited by the rules matter supposedly follows. They imagine themselves as animals, as superheroes, as different ages, different forms, and their energy responds. Their experience shifts. Their bodies express abilities that adults insist aren't possible. Then they get taught, you are your body, this physical form, and it has specific limitations you must accept. And slowly their energy condenses into matter identification, and the flexibility disappears, and they become adults who've forgotten what they actually are. But the body never forgets. The energy never stops being energy. It just gets buried under layers of conditioning, belief, and identification with the physical surface. What's one thing you truly want to manifest, and why does it matter to you? Drop it in the comments. I'm selecting 2 people for complimentary one-on-one sessions to help you bring it into reality. Be genuine. Be yourself. The instant reality rearranges itself. Now I need to share something that will sound impossible unless you've felt it directly. But since you're still here, since something pulled you this far, you're ready to hear it. The moment you genuinely recognize yourself as energy rather than matter, reality around you right away begins rearranging. Not gradually over time, not eventually down the road, immediately. Because reality is not fixed, solid, separate from your awareness. Reality is the quantum field collapsing into specific arrangements based on observation, and the observer's fundamental identity determines what arrangements become available to collapse into physical manifestation. When you observe reality as a separate material being, certain possibilities exist, and others stay impossible. Physical laws look fixed. Change needs time and effort. Circumstances have weight and momentum that resists being altered. But when you observe reality as energy recognizing itself through this temporary form, the entire framework shifts. Possibilities that were impossible under matter identification suddenly become available. Physical laws show themselves as statistical probabilities rather than absolute rules. Change can happen instantly because you're no longer trying to rearrange solid matter. You're allowing energy to reorganize into different patterns. I've watched this happen in my own experience over and over since that initial recognition 3 years back. Not through willpower or technique, but through natural reorganization that occurs when the observer's identity changes. Financial situations that seemed hopelessly stuck, suddenly resolving through completely unexpected channels. Relationships that felt permanently broken, spontaneously healing without any conversation or effort. Health conditions reversing themselves in ways doctors call miraculous, but which are simply energy returning to natural, coherent patterns once limiting identity dissolves. The skeptical mind will always find alternate explanations. Coincidence? psychosomatic effects, confirmation bias, placebo response. And sure, you can interpret it that way if you need to hold on to your matter identification, but direct experience tells a different story. When you recognize yourself as energy, reality recognizes you differently and responds accordingly. The people who already live this way. You've probably come across people who move through reality differently. Not more successfully necessarily, not happier or more enlightened in any obvious way, but there's something about their presence that feels lighter, more flexible, as if they're not quite as dense as everyone else. These people don't go around talking about energy or consciousness or quantum physics. They might not have any spiritual practice or know anything about the concepts I'm sharing here, but they've somehow naturally maintained or rediscovered the recognition of themselves as energy rather than pure matter. Watch how they handle challenges. There's no heavy resistance, no solid tension against what's happening. They flow around obstacles the way water flows around rocks, not through positive thinking or spiritual technique, but through the simple absence of the density that creates resistance. Watch how circumstances organize around them. Opportunities show up, resources appear, the right people come along at the right time. Not because they're lucky or favored by the universe, but because their energy field These people are proof that what I'm sharing isn't theory or philosophy. They're living demonstrations of what naturally happens when consciousness stops identifying exclusively with dense material form. And here's the interesting part. Most of them can't explain how they do it, because they're not doing anything. They're being what they actually are. And reality responds to that being with flow, ease, and synchronistic support. You can learn all the techniques, practices, and methods in the world, but if your fundamental identity stays matter rather than energy, those techniques will feel like trying to polish a stone into light. Effort, friction, limited results. But shift the identity itself. Recognize what you actually are beneath the conditioned layers, and everything else becomes natural expression rather than forced achievement. What comes next? I'm not going to tell you what to do with this recognition, not because I'm holding back information, but because doing is the wrong approach entirely. You don't do energy identification. You relax into it. You allow it. You stop gripping so tightly to the matter story and notice what's already here underneath that story. Some of you are already feeling it as you read these words. A lightness, an opening, a sense of boundaries dissolving slightly. That's not imagination. That's your direct experience recognizing truth before your thinking mind can categorize and contain it. Others are still resisting, still locked in the skepticism that protects matter identification from threatening dissolution. That's fine too. The recognition happens when it happens, and forcing it just creates more density. But I'll tell you what naturally occurs as this recognition deepens, not as prediction, but as description of what simply unfolds. When energy recognizes itself, your relationship with fear transforms. Not because you overcome fear, but because fear itself is a product of believing you're a vulnerable, solid thing that can be damaged or destroyed. When you experience yourself as energy, as consciousness temporarily focused into form but never limited to that form, fear loses its foundation. Your physical vitality increases without effort. The density that creates fatigue, that requires constant energy management and protection, dissolves. Energy flows through rather than getting trapped in matter patterns, and your body expresses that flow as natural vitality. Your manifestation speed accelerates dramatically, not because you've learned better techniques, but because you're no longer trying to rearrange solid matter through force of will. You're allowing energy to reorganize into configurations that match the frequency you're broadcasting, and energy reorganizes far faster than matter appears to. Your intuition becomes reliable, accurate, immediate, because you're receiving information through energetic resonance, rather than filtering everything through mental analysis. The field speaks directly to the field, consciousness to consciousness, bypassing the limiting interface of matter identification. most significantly, the existential anxiety that colors most human experience simply dissolves. Because that anxiety is rooted in the terror of being a separate, vulnerable material form in a threatening universe. But when you know yourself as energy, as consciousness itself, the entire premise of that anxiety reveals itself as false. You're not a separate thing that can be harmed. You're the field itself, temporarily experiencing itself through this particular form, absolutely safe, because you are the totality temporarily focused into individuality. The statement that shifts everything. I want you to make a declaration right now, not to me, not to the universe, but to yourself, to the deepest level of your own consciousness that's been waiting for this recognition. Say it internally or out loud if you're able to. I am not this body, I am the energy bringing it to life. I am not confined to matter, I am consciousness experiencing itself in form. I release identification with density and recognize my true nature as living energy, temporarily expressed but never limited. Feel what happens as you make that statement. Don't analyze it. Don't question whether you really believe it. Just notice what shifts, however subtly, in your direct experience of being alive right now. That shift, that small opening, is the beginning of everything I've described. Not the end, but the beginning. The first crack in the density that's been covering your actual nature. You don't have to maintain this recognition constantly. That would just it becomes a reference point you can return to, a depth you can drop into, a truth you can remember, even when the surface of your experience gets caught in drama and density again. And each time you return to it, the recognition deepens, stabilizes, integrates more fully until it's no longer something you do or remember. It simply becomes how you experience being alive. The reality you've always been seeking. Everything you've been chasing, every manifestation technique you've learned, every improvement you've pursued, all of it has been motivated by one underlying desire.